Do you struggle with conflict? Do people describe you as being a nice guy, or do you often feel like you're a people pleaser? If any of these are true for you, it could be because you tend to avoid conflict. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the answer to the question, why am I afraid of conflict? There's more going on than you might expect, so stick around and we'll dive in. Hi there, I'm Cody Mitz. I'm a licensed therapist. I specialize in anger management counseling, and I also help people who are struggling with trauma or PTSD. Now, I say that because in today's video, I'm going to talk about why do you struggle with confrontation, or why do you struggle with conflict? And there's some similarities that exist, I think, between anger management and between trauma and PTSD. Now, I think this is an important topic because there's a lot of people who might give you advice like, just go out there and practice confronting, or just practice doing conflict. But I think that misunderstands what's really going on. I think there's a lot more happening in your brain, in your emotions, in your thoughts, some of them that you're probably not even really aware of or recognizing, but it's important to understand those so that we can really work on kind of the deeper problem or kind of the root issue to really help you be able to become more comfortable with conflict or confrontation. Now, something that is hard for some people to hear is that conflict avoidance is generally related to the emotion of fear. And I say that people don't really like that because as humans, we don't necessarily like to think of ourselves as being afraid of things. But again, I'm talking about more of a neurological thing that's happening outside of your consciousness or outside of your awareness that's actually triggering this feeling of fear that may not be a conscious feeling of fear. So you may not say, oh, I'm afraid of this person, or I'm afraid of talking to this person. But some of the things that you're feeling, some of the things that your nervous system is doing are actually just the same as if you really were consciously thinking, oh, I'm afraid of this situation. So we're going to look at what are those things that are happening that are outside of your conscious awareness. Now, your brain is a pretty fascinating thing. It's pretty complicated, there's a lot going on, but to break it down in some simple ways, our brain operates in a few basic different ways. So one of those basic things is called procedural memories. Now, procedural memories are things like remembering how to drive your car. When you're first learning to do that, you're very conscious about it. You really think about what you're doing when you're stepping on the gas, when you're stepping on the brake. But after years of experience, you probably get into your car and you don't really think about what you're doing. You're probably able to multitask and do other things, some things that you probably shouldn't do while you're driving your vehicle, but you're not really thinking about what's happening. Your procedural memory is kicking in and you're just kind of operating out of instinct. And that same thing can happen with your emotions. And so the way that this relates to conflict or conflict avoidance is that your emotions and your body are responding in a very specific way that are outside of your conscious awareness. So when something happens, there's some conflict or there's a confrontation, it can trigger this feeling of fear within you that isn't, again, it's not within your conscious awareness. You're not really thinking about feeling afraid. You just might have this feeling that's uncomfortable or a feeling that you don't like. And so what you're doing is you're trying to avoid that feeling that's uncomfortable or that doesn't feel good. It's a very natural response. It's something that we all do as humans. But for some of us that struggle with conflict or confrontation, you're actually being triggered, and that feeling that you can't control is what's really causing you to avoid conflict or to avoid the confrontation that you're having. Now, the reason I think this is important is because, again, a lot of well-intended people might tell you, well, you just need to learn how to be assertive. There's even assertiveness training programs out there. Not to say that those are bad or that they don't work, but I think that there are some other things that we need to work on. And again, I think you need to really spend some time working on kind of that deeper root issue that's causing this fear of conflict to rise up within you. It's to deal with some of these triggers. Now, that might require some deeper work, It might require talking to a therapist or talking to a counselor, but there are some things that you can do yourself. One of them is just practicing what's called mindfulness, which basically is just learning to increase your self-awareness. So learning to really pay attention to what you're feeling when that feeling of avoidance is triggered. So when there's conflict in front of you and you might feel that urge to want to run away or to not say anything or to shut down, I want you to start to kind of practice just observing what's happening, observing that feeling so that you can really start to understand or be more mindful of how your body and how your emotions are responding to that conflict or to that confrontation. Now, something I would encourage you to do that might seem a little counterintuitive is that when you're practicing mindfulness and when you're becoming aware of this feeling, which is probably fear, is I want you to actually practice being kind and being gentle to yourself. From my own experience, I know that when I feel this way, oftentimes I feel like it's something that is embarrassing, or I don't want people to know that I struggle with conflict or struggle with confrontation. But I think being kind to yourself and just letting yourself be okay, recognize the feeling, process through it in some healthy ways, and once you're able to work through and kind of process through those underlying feelings, I think that confrontation gets a lot easier, and it's not something you just have to force yourself into. Because if you can deal with the trigger, the thing that's causing you to want to flee or to run away, then it gets a lot easier to practice doing conflict with somebody. Now, you might be wondering where this feeling comes from. And like most things in life, there's probably a combination of both just natural things about you, your personality, your genetics, and in combination with things that you've experienced in your life, and most likely early life experiences. So for a lot of the people that I work with as a therapist who struggle with conflict or struggle with confrontation, typically they haven't seen good, healthy conflict modeled to them. So that's something I talk about a lot in other videos when I'm talking about anger management, is modeling. And a lot of the ways that we behave, a lot of the ways that our emotions function is because of things that we've learned from our life experience, the way that our families or our friends or our parents functioned, and the things that we learned when we were young and when your brain was developing. So some of these things are just a natural response to the environment that you were raised in. Dealing with conflict in a healthy way is probably going to take some practice, and it's going to take some work if it's something that you struggle with. Now, I want to encourage you, what I've talked about in this video is to start by looking at what are the underlying things that are causing this feeling to come up. And once you've worked on that, then learning some healthy skills. So communication is a really big one, and learning how to express yourself in assertive ways rather than aggressive ways. Because one of the things I see a lot as an anger management counselor is people will come to me who I would say might describe themselves, again, as being kind of a nice guy or a people pleaser. And they come to me for help with anger, which might seem counterintuitive to what a lot of people expect about someone that would come to anger management. A lot of times the people who come to see me for help are actually very nice, very easygoing people. And the reason that you struggle with anger is because you avoid conflict, you don't really feel comfortable doing it, so these emotions just kind of build and build and build until it gets to this point where you can't really hold it in, you can't contain it anymore. So you lash out in this kind of aggressive way, or you do something that feels really uncomfortable with your anger. And so learning to deal with conflict or confrontation is going to be really important for you to be able to manage anger, to manage the emotion of anger in your life in a really healthy way. Now, if you found this video helpful, I would encourage you to come and join our Facebook group. We have an anger management support group. You can check out the link for it down in the description down below. There's some other resources there to help you. There's an anger management guide that will guide you through just some basic things you should know about anger management. And of course, let me know any questions or thoughts you might have about how to manage conflict or confrontation healthy in your life. Thanks for sticking around. I hope that you found this helpful. Until next time, take good care of yourself.